Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is October 13th, 2022. This is your daily Ukraine update, and we are going to be asking ourselves, is Russia's drone strikes actually paying off, or is it starting to backfire? Let's get into it. So first off, we will take a look at the map, and the big news is, well, that there really isn't any news. We can see here, Ukrainian forces are slightly pushing the Russian front line back a little bit in the north area of Kupiansk. This could be a result of fighting, or it could just be reflecting reality. You can see this. This may be simply Russian forces choosing to reposition themselves to a natural defensive area. Right? There's all these urban built-up sites, and as we've talked about in other videos, you want to bring your enemy into an area, an engagement area is what it's called, where there's just not a lot of cover or concealment. Let's see if we can switch this over to a satellite map. Yeah, if you wanted to really cause trouble for advancing Ukrainian forces, you would put your forces in these villages. You would try to get as much elevation as possible. You would force them to cross big open areas. So I think this actually might not be Ukrainian forces being pushed back. I think this may be a case of Russian forces just repositioning in better defensive postures. And we've talked a lot about this. This is exactly what a more prudent Russian commander would be doing. Maybe there's still one person with common sense left in the Russian command structure. But when we look to the south, we see, of course, the exact opposite. We see that Ukrainian forces are actually repositioning in ways that sort of improve their position. We've talked how that it can be very dangerous for a defender to be sort of stuck out on a salient. It allows enemy contact to come from three directions. You can see Ukrainian forces have shored up to the left and right, preventing this Nova Kamyanka from becoming a exposed salient. So what we're seeing here is exactly what we would expect normally from a pause in offensive operations. These are both sides consolidating their gains, improving their defensive positions, and getting ready, presumably for both of them, to transition to the offense. Now, here's where things get weird. And that's because we won't even look at the Institute for the Study of War. Russia has continued its attacks on Ukraine using more air assets. But instead of attacking the Ukraine armed forces and engaging in engaging in operational or tactical targets, they instead are targeting civilian infrastructure. This is a tactic that is actually, it dates back all the way to Alexander the Great, but really was attempted in this way, using air power to reach back behind the front lines to your enemy's civilian areas. What you end up with is a situation where you're trying to bring the war home, so to speak, and punish the civilian population for supporting the ongoing conflict. And this is particularly effective this is believed to be effective in democratic states where pro-war leaders can be voted out of office by a population that gets tired of war. But it can even work, the theory goes, in autocratic countries where popular resistance to the war will simply grow. The problem is that while common sense tells us that people wouldn't like being bombed, human beings are naturally sort of tribal creatures. And when we have an external threat, especially like, say, the Russians as an external threat to Ukrainian people, instead of becoming exhausted by the war, the civilians that are targeted in these airstrikes become hardened, become more committed, and become more serious about defeating the enemy. This was true in World War II when the U.S. would do general bombing against major German cities, against Japanese cities. They never achieved the effects. There was never a real break in the population population's willingness to support the war, even though it became ever more exhausting as more and more strikes landed. Here's the thing, and that's probably what Russia is trying to do now. They think they're innovating, but they're not. It's been tried and done, and it's been shown that in almost every country, when you engage in these sort of airstrikes against civilian population centers far away from the front, all it does is show the civilians that they are in this conflict too, and creates greater solidarity and support for the people who are striking back. But I think Russia's running out of steam. Why do I say this? Well, you notice that the numbers are not yet in, but it seems like we're not seeing quite the number of cruise missiles that we thought. We can see here again, ground.news. This is the source you want to use for news in this conflict. They're a great supporter of the channel, and if you want to check them out for free, check my link in the description. But you can see here that left, right, and center-leaning sources, not a one of them seems to be reporting missiles, which is interesting because the past 2 days, it's been a mix of drone strikes and missiles, but left-leaning sources, right-leaning sources are all describing just drone attacks. Well, as we've talked about, Russia's cruise missile arsenal is not infinite, and it's actually probably pretty limited. And the fact that it is using its very limited resource of precision strike equipment, precision, oh my gosh, I can't talk this morning, precision strike munitions, the fact that it can't seem to, that it's using them against civilian targets is really, really strange and troubling. And it's also a problem because they seem like they might have just run themselves out of it and that they're stuck now using borrowed drones from Iran. Now, it's possible that it'll come out that Russia indeed threw a bunch of cruise missiles as well. But just the reports seem to indicate that the numbers are just steadily dropping over time. And the real hard part is that for Putin, again, I believe he was hoping that these strikes would buy his armed forces space and time to return to the offensive. We saw that with that push into Bakhmut that seemed to have been largely defeated. But we see it up here where there's not really any attack happening. There's supposedly some level of Russian offensive effort in Kherson, but you guys can see it really hasn't done anything at all to advance Russian positions. So ultimately, the end of the day, all Putin will have achieved from a strategic perspective is hardened Ukrainian resolve, gained 0 kilometers of territory, and expended and eliminated his precision strike munition arsenal. In fact, things are actually even worse because there's some reports, again, a lot of sources are reporting it, but it generally seems on a little right of center, that the Ukrainian Air Force is saying it shot down 4 Russian attack helicopters in quick succession on Wednesday. That's for Russia, who's already lost a large number of attack helicopters, and thanks to sanctions, is probably not going to be able to restore or rebuild these helicopters. This is pretty troubling. That is not a lot. That is a lot of their remaining combat air power. So to lose 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, is a tremendous, tremendous blow, again, towards Russia's biggest advantage, which is their high-tech weapon systems, their ability to reach out and deliver punishing blows to Ukraine when Ukraine, because of conditions imposed by its supporters, cannot reach back into Russia. So anyway, guys, that is all I had for you. Of course, be sure to check out Ground News. Link is in the description. And also, if you want access to some uncensored combat videos, YouTube is, as always, cracking down on my content. So there's a lot of the breakdowns I can't show on YouTube are on the Patreon. I'm on the road, so I can't put up the most up-to-date Patreon members, but I thank all my Patreon members and especially the Lieutenant tier members. I'll see you guys in the next one.